really happy to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming. The name of the program, as you can see, is Ending the Silence. We're here to talk about how we can end the silence around talking about mental illness. As Father Gary said, I'm Tracy, that's Diane. If you ever need anything at the office, at the NAMI office, you can always call Diane, she's over here. So, a little tidbit about NAMI that's good to know is that it is a nonprofit organization and it is a grassroots organization, and every service that NAMI provides is provided for free. So that's a nice thing to know. We're here for the community and we do everything for free. So I also want you to know that I am not a social worker. I'm a little nervous. Not a social worker, not a therapist, not a psychiatrist. Neither is Scott, neither is Diane. We're here because of our capacity as experts with our lived experience, and that's what we're going to share with you throughout tonight. And we're just going to get started.
Having good mental health helps us stay positive. It helps us beat stress. It helps us deal with life when times are hard. But the reality is that despite sometimes, no matter how well we take care of ourselves, mental illness can still develop. So that's what we want to talk about, what it is. So it's called by many different names. It doesn't really matter. It all boils down to the same thing. So whether somebody's saying I have a mental health condition or, whatever they want to call it, it's all the same. So what is another point that's really, really important that we like to share is for many years, and this is part of the stigma around mental illness, it was believed that it was a character defect or it was caused by bad parenting or it was caused by any number of things. This is just not the case. Mental illness is a physical illness, so just like heart disease or diabetes, you would go to a doctor to get help. Mental illness is exactly the same thing. So the thinking right now, and Dr. Bob, if you want to chime in, if you have anything to say, feel free, But the thinking right now is that it's caused by a combination of things, which is, of course, the genetic factors, but it also can be triggered by environmental factors. So those can, like we said, be stress, life events, drug use, hormonal changes, physical illnesses. So these things can also play a part in it. In my daughter's case, I'll be talking about our story a little bit off and on before we get to Scott, but my mother died very suddenly when my daughter was 13, and the trauma surrounding her unexpected death wasn't the cause of her illness, but I believe it was certainly one of the triggers that exacerbated the problem. So again, it's really important to know that what mental illness is not is, it's not anyone's fault. So that's really key. And the good news is that it doesn't have to limit you either. People with mental illness are achieving all the goals that they set for themselves, they're getting help, and there is help available. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the media right now that would lead us to believe that people with mental illness commit a lot of violent crime. And unfortunately, sometimes that's the case. But the reality is, with the statistics, that people who have mental illness are actually more likely to be the victim of a crime than they are a perpetrator. So that's another reason why we want to talk about it, because we don't want friends or family members to be victimized. So we like to always throw in a few facts. And we put this here because of what you saw in the show of hands of how common mental illness is. So the statistic right now is that 20% of, which is mostly your age range in here, 13 will have a mental health condition in a given year. So the good news about it, though, is that, as I said, they are treatable. So stigma is one of the biggest reasons that we're here again to talk about it, because in the silence, stigma is one of the biggest reasons people don't get help, and that can actually last for years and years. People cannot get help for 8 to 10 years because they feel ashamed, or they feel embarrassed, or they feel like they did something wrong. So we're really trying to get the word out, because imagine your age is now, where you'll be like 8 years from now. You'll be done with high school, wherever you're going on to next. And think about all the time that if you were struggling, you could have been using that time to get help. So we like to encourage people, the earlier the intervention, the better. And I'll probably say that several more times before the end of the year. So what exactly is stigma? As I said, feelings of discrimination, feelings of being ostracized, feelings of shame that can prevent us from getting help. So the reason bullying is on this slide is because it's a huge problem still. I know the last place I did this presentation was high school, and we were in health class, and they had done their bullying unit. I'm sure all of you guys have done it. So they had all their pictures around the room of what does bullying look like and how does it feel. You all know, is there anyone in here, like by show of hands, how many of us have been bullied? Right, so pretty common. And it feels pretty crummy. So we really all have to work together to try to really prevent bullying. When my daughter was in treatment, and she went through many different treatment programs, for kids with many different kinds of issues, one common theme that emerged with all the kids was that they had been bullied. Some for long periods of time, like my daughter, though she never told us, and others just a couple of times. So it's something that, as parents and as friends and ourselves, if we're being bullied, we need to tell a trusted adult so that we can get help to end it. If we're seeing people being bullied, we should try to intervene, or again, talk to a trusted adult so that we can try to get this behavior to end. So, sorry, it's a little bit like, I like to talk here too about judgment, because we're all human. And we all have judgmental thoughts, and we all do judgmental actions and stuff. And that's human nature, and it's okay. But the key is to try to pay attention to your thoughts and your actions. And if you see yourself or see a friend, again, acting judgmental or saying judgmental things or mean things like calling people names or like crazy or insane or things like that, just to try to model better behavior and to try to encourage people to reduce that kind of bullying and judgmental behavior. So we're going to get into warning signs, which I'm going to put all of these up here. Okay. So it's really important, obviously, for friends, for parents, for anyone to be aware of what early warning signs can be. Early warning signs, in our case with my daughter, her name is Olivia, she was getting ready to enter her 8th grade year, and it started off kind of subtle, where she woke up one day and she just decided, you know, she didn't want to eat as much food. So that's where we started. So we went on for a couple of weeks like that, and then she decided she didn't really want to eat any food. So she would go to school, and she wouldn't have eaten anything all day, and she would come home, and she held herself together as whatever, you know, her thoughts were that were telling her bad things about herself and that she wasn't worthy and that all these things, she would be able to make it through the day at school where she had that structure, and then she would come home and disintegrate either into despair or rage. And so this was really our first warning sign that something was starting to go wrong. That had not been her typical behavior prior to that. So as that progressed, she started to say things like, you know, what are you putting in my water to poison me? That's something that, you know, you can listen for people saying things that just kind of don't make any sense. You can listen for people talking about seeing things that aren't there. That can be something that can happen. So all of these things exacerbated her depression, which were making her the lack of food because she wasn't eating enough to help her brain function properly, was putting her into a downward spiral. And I'm going to tell more a little bit on this slide. Because here are some more. So as the months wore on, we were able to fairly quickly get her, thank you very much, get her into treatment, which really early on did not unfortunately do very much good. So at that time, other things you can look for. Now, we didn't have this problem, but what can happen is that people can also turn to drugs. They can turn to alcohol to mask the symptoms of feeling bad. So it can be like, you know, a really bad deadly spiral, because if there's something going on and then you add the drugs, or the opposite can be true, where you can start with drugs and alcohol and that can trigger mental illness as well. So we just really like to talk about that, because a lot of times people only see the behavior. So they see the drug abuse, or they see the alcohol use, or they see acting out behavior and all these things, and don't stop to think that maybe there could be something more significant going on. Not necessarily, but it also could be. So you just don't want to assume that it's one thing or the other.
Tracy, I have just a question. Because you say these are early warning signs, and if, with your experience with your daughter, Olivia, when did you realize that it was a sign of something greater? What were the signs that led you to thinking that there was something great, a bigger problem than it was?
Well, for me, I have the lucky, good fortune of having gone to graduate school for counseling psychology. So I pretty quickly, with the first, her food getting cut in half to eating nothing at all, was a pretty big sign, because it's just not, you know, I mean, you can't function on no food. And then, I mean, with the outbursts, the behaviors, the crying, the screaming, the raging, for her, it became apparent pretty fast, which is not always the case, but for her, it was pretty fast that we were pretty sure there was something wrong. So I did take her initially. A good place to always start is with your family doctor. You know, I took her to the pediatrician several times in a short period of time, and she concurred with what I was fearing and thought that it was time to get her into treatment, and so we did. So her behaviors did continue to escalate, and within 3 to 4 months or so, she was starting to self-harm. So what we call those are negative coping skills, and really they are an attempt to cope. So, you know, on the one hand, that's a good thing, but on the other hand, the negative part is obviously that they're negative and that they mask the symptoms. They don't really solve any problems. So we're going to talk a little bit later about positive coping skills. But the other thing also is that obviously some of the things that were on these slides, they happen to all of us. Like, we get stressed out, we have a bad day, you know, we lose a loved one. Things like this are very traumatic, so we can all have normal bouts of these types of issues. Doesn't mean that it's mental illness. It means that it's, you know, grief or whatever you're dealing with. So the key is really the level of persistence in terms of time. So we're talking about at least 2 weeks or more that this is ongoing, and the severity. If you can't get out of bed and leave your house, you know, that's pretty severe. If your ability to live your life is being impacted, that's also a good sign that it's something more significant. Okay, so what should you do? Well, don't keep it a secret. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Don't, for yourself, you know, keep it a secret. Don't think you can just, you know, work harder and you'll get over it. I'll just pull myself up by my bootstraps. That's not the case. I mean, these are issues that need treatment, and there are people who can help. So you don't have to suffer alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. And I'll share that with your friend. If it's your friend who you think is suffering, they don't have to suffer alone too. So we don't want to make any promises to friends who are talking about this kind of stuff that we won't tell, and that we're going to keep it a secret because we just can't. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So I am going to read this list because, I mean, obviously, this is a huge issue. It's a huge concern for parents, for friends, for schools, for everyone involved in the helping professions. So what are the warning signs of suicide? Immediate attention is needed for yourself or for your friend. If someone is talking, writing, or drawing about death, if someone's saying that they have no reason to live or they don't feel like they have a reason to live, that they're a burden to other people, that they don't plan on being here tomorrow. If you see someone looking for ways to attempt suicide, this could even be like at the library doing, you know, research. Someone could be Googling things about this sort of stuff. If someone's talking to you about feeling hopeless or desperate or trapped, and if they start giving away their possessions, that's another key thing that something could be really wrong, behaving recklessly as well. There, you know, are shades of gray here. My daughter never said that she was going to kill herself. She just said she couldn't be alive anymore. So this is, you know, a shade of gray on the same thing, and all of it should be taken seriously. So again, I mean, the one thing you want to do is not keep a secret and talk to a trusted adult. So it's a myth, too, that if you ask somebody about it, it makes them more likely to commit suicide. That, in fact, is not the case. If someone is already thinking about it, you asking them if they're thinking about it is not going to make them do it. Asking someone about it and talking to them about it is the best way to prevent suicide. And suicide is preventable. So here's some things. I mean, some of these are common sense. You know, if you feel imminently afraid for somebody, you call 911. There's, you know, trusted adults here with Father Gary, your parents, people in school. There's lots of resources and ways to get help, so talk to somebody that you trust.
This was the first day we met. I knew right away that you were going to be a big part of my life. We had had so many good times. But this was the day you started acting different. You isolated yourself. You were sad all the time. I thought you were ignoring me. But when I saw your wrists, I knew it was much more than that. I knew I had to talk to an adult, so you could get the help that you needed. And today is the day we appreciate the life that could have been lost.
Not every friendship has a tomorrow. If someone you know is showing signs of suicide, talk to an adult or call the suicide prevention lifeline, because suicide can be prevented.
Okay, so you guys can just yell out if you have an idea. What do you think happens to people who, you kind of talked about a little bit, but what do you think happens to people who don't get help for their mental illness? They just call it anything.
They get depressed.
Depressed, get worse.
They try to hurt themselves because they don't think like they belong in life, or they like think something like they're the worst person alive or something.
Yes, they think they're really bad thoughts about themselves, for sure. That's something that happened to my daughter at first, before she started getting help. She thought she was worthless, and she didn't understand why she was here or that there was anything good about her.
When they think that they're just being a burden on everyone else, and they think that if I'm not here, then they'll be a lot happier.
Very good, very good. And one thing I wanted to point out a little earlier too, these are all really good answers, is that, you know, usually mental illness doesn't get diagnosed until, you know, late teens, early 20s, but it's becoming more prevalent today to be realized a lot younger than that. So it could be the case even that you have a friend, or, you know, there's a kid that you know that doesn't even know that their thinking is a little skewed. They might have been thinking these thoughts for as long as they can remember. So that's why we like to say, what could people be thinking about? Because if you hear these kinds of words coming out of their mouth, they don't even know that they could feel better, because they maybe have never felt better. So that's why we want to make sure we try to get people help. But the point is, the good news is that you can get better. And there's lots of different ways for that to happen. So just like with a regular, quote-unquote, physical biological condition, when you go to the doctor, like if you have heart disease or diabetes, you go to the doctor and you get medication and you follow treatment things. The exact same thing is true for mental illness. And there's lots of different choices, lots of different types of therapy. There's medication. There's all kinds of stuff that can be done today. And this field is obviously growing. There's going to be more treatments, better treatments coming. Medications are going to work better. There'll be less side effects. So all these things are really good for helping. And Scott will probably be talking about this in a little bit. But all of these things help people lead healthy lives, productive, reaching goals, doing the things they want to do. So that's the primary reason why I'm standing here, because with a combination, well, many different combinations over time, but with a combination of different types of therapy, different types of programs that included residential treatment for my daughter. We had to send her to live away from us for a little while. But with all those things, with support at school, with a school therapist, with an outside therapist, with medication, with family support, she's doing great. She's back in school. She is getting great grades. She's an athlete. She's got a driver's license. She's got a boyfriend, you know, all the things that people want to have. So I share our story with you so that you can know these positive outcomes aren't fantasy, they are reality, and they're happening every day. So again, if someone you know is suffering, tell them not to fear to reach out, because help is available. So I talked a few minutes ago about negative coping skills and how they mask problematic symptoms. So what are some positive ones? Pretty much anything you can think of. So if you like to walk, my daughter writes. She journals, and she gets a lot of exercise being an athlete, so water is her thing. So she's in the pool almost all year long. That helps her a lot. Anything. Music, meditation, prayer. What are some things that people like to do that just make you feel good? Ride? Like horses? Run. Run, yes. Ride horses? Yeah, that's too. Yoga, that's a good one. Missy, a hand back there?
I would say horses, yes.
Horses, yeah. I knew we had a horse person here somewhere. There's always one. Yeah, pretty much anything to draw. My daughter loves to draw too. So she draws, she writes, she sings. And is there choir here? Choir? There's choir, there's dancing here. I mean, there's anything that helps you feel positive about yourself, that's uplifting, is a positive coping skill and will help you achieve and maintain recovery. So I would hazard a guess. I was going to say, I don't think that's me. I would imagine that you guys at least will have to recognize some of these faces. A couple of them, like, are a little old, maybe not everybody in here probably knows who JFK is, but maybe. But the point is that everyone up here suffers with some form of mental illness, and some of them with many different forms. So we just like to put this slide up here because we're re-emphasizing and emphasizing and re-emphasizing that mental illness doesn't have to prevent anyone from achieving goals and living the life they want to live. So Demi Lovato there on the end, some of you probably know who she is. She lives with bipolar disorder, and she is definitely one of the young kind of people who's out in the world spreading the message that I have this, I live with it, it's okay, I'm fine, I treat it, I deal with it, I do what I need to do to stay healthy and positive, and, you know, look where she is in the world, so it's possible for anyone. John Mayer, Buzz Aldrin, that was the astronaut Buzz Aldrin. So, how can you help a friend? Well, we've kind of touched on this. You can help a friend by being a good friend. That's really it. If someone you know is struggling or just wants to talk, you know, talk to them. Hang out with them. Let them know you care. Let them know that they're a good friend and that you want to be a good friend to them. Include people in your plans. It can be really hard, I'll tell you at the start. So, you know, when my daughter first got ill, it was really hard for her to get through the day. She was suffering. She was suffering emotionally, she was suffering physically, she was suffering in just about every way you can suffer. So she lost interest in spending time with her friends because she couldn't handle it. She lost interest in the activities that she loved to do. She stopped leaving the house, really. She stopped caring about, you know, even just the things like taking care of yourself, like when you brush your teeth every morning, wash your face before you leave the house. So that was at first before things started to improve. So it's really nice to have, you know, at least one special friend in your life at that point in time. Someone who can call you up and say, hey, do you want to hang out? Or, you know, do you just want to go for a walk? Or do you want to talk or something? Because it can be a little hard for that person to express that they are struggling. And so just to know that someone cares and that someone is willing to listen can make such a huge difference, much bigger difference than you probably even imagined, but it really can. So that's how you can really help a friend.
You are my friend. You are not a mental illness, because you cannot be defined by that, just as I cannot be defined by my race, gender, or sexuality. You can be defined by your strength, both literally and figuratively, and by your amazing sense of humor. You always know how to put a smile on my face. You can also be defined by your passion for music. There are endless definitions to who you are. Unfortunately, there are some people who would rather define us by what makes us different from them. However, you are more similar to me than many of those people are. you because you deserve a lot better than you often endure. You're not your mental illness because that could happen to anyone. You are uniquely you because of your character.
So we've kind of talked about what stigma is, and we've talked about bullying. Again, in the just call out your answer format, can anybody come up with an idea that maybe they could be willing to implement or just think as an idea that could help eliminate stigma? Yeah, it's so hard about it, like, eliminate stigma. Well, really, I guess the key is just, again, with the bullying and with judgment and with name calling when we hear it. This is stuff, no one wants to be called names, you know, no one wants to be judged, no one wants to be looked down on. So to just really try to think of ways where you can encourage people and be positive and be uplifting. And again, if you see somebody saying mean things or doing mean things, just call them out on it, because usually bullies don't like to be confronted, and when they're confronted, they'll back down. But if you feel like it's a situation that you can't handle, then for sure you talk to a trusted adult or a teacher or someone who can help step in and make it. Okay, so remember, we want to remember these main mental health conditions or medical illnesses, just like any other medical illness, like heart disease or diabetes, and they need treatment as such. They are not anyone's fault, and they're not something that you just get over. It's really helpful to look out for those key warning signs so you can identify if someone you know and love is struggling, and you are not alone. You are not alone. I know when my daughter first got sick, I was convinced that we were the only people on the planet who were going through what we were going through, and that there wasn't another soul who could possibly understand how painful it was and all the nuances. And I mean, just from what I asked you in here when we started, and almost everybody raised your hand, that's the reality of the matter. I mean, I'm so not alone. Olivia's so not alone. None of us is alone in this struggle. You are not alone. Recovery is possible, and there is hope, that's for sure. I'm standing here right now to share that message as well, too, because we're absolutely living proof of it, and we all have the power to end the silence.
Studies show that 1 in 5 teens are living with a mental health challenge.
However, mental health symptoms are treatable.
Don't be afraid to take a stand against the stigma.
Speak up or show support.
If we all speak loud enough, we can end the silence for good. Join the conversation and find support at www.reachouthere.com.
Okay, so there's tons of information on the NAMI website if anyone wants to learn more. There's a national website for NAMI, and there's also NAMI Ventura County website. Diane's always in the office. If anyone has questions, she answers the phone when you call. Right now, I'm going to turn the program over to Scott, who's going to talk to you about this story, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end if anyone has any questions. Thank you, everybody.
You want to use the microphone?
No,
Is that okay?
All right, yeah.
Great. My name is Scott McMahon. I'm from Hawaii. My experience with depression started as a kid, and not just depression, but that was an experience. You know, I was really sad growing up. I cried a lot. I always felt very lonely, and, you know, to express that when you're a kid. And I just kind of grew up, lived with it. And by the 7th grade, I had missed something like 90% of all the days of school. And things like I would try to get sick, so I would soak and stuff. That was, I did that a couple times, so it was bad enough that I really was but by high school, my dad introduced me to the bike. So it gave me an outlet for my anxiety and depression. Really helped, and by freshman year, I attended almost all days of school. And my fitness really changed how I, basically, it changed my outlook on things, and I had an outlet, and I was making friends doing it. I was taking my friends out on bike rides, and it was really enjoyable. And by, I was doing very well. By junior year of my high school, I had done the time trial championships in California, and I had gotten 6th place, which was big. I was doing all right. And, but what happened was it started getting really hard. Not like it was harder, like it was physically harder to bike, it was physically harder to push myself on the bike, and I was wondering what was going on with me. And I was always checking my tire pressure, I was always checking to see if I was sick, I was going to the doctor, getting blood tests and stuff like that, and I was just wondering what was going on. And in reality, I was just depressed. And I had gotten tests for mono and stuff like that, and they were all coming back negative, and it was just, it really put a damper on my cycling and how much I could do it. And eventually in college I stopped cycling at all. And that's when everything started to kind of focus, mentally. And not only was I dealing with depression and anxiety now, but it manifested as OCD. And eventually I did psychopathy, which is I was just completely delusional. And I came home from school that after my freshman year of college, I came home and I described to my dad, later I described to my dad as I had come home and everything had been shifted by an inch. So everything was just slightly off. And I was really I couldn't read into anything anyone said to me. There was always a subtext to it. So I was always reading into the subtext of what people say. It worked itself into a delusion. And to give you an example, it changed my driving habits. I thought people were following me, and I was constantly checking in the rearview mirror. I would put on my blinker. It was really dangerous when I was doing it. I was putting on my blinker to tell I was signaling and trying to get people to put on their blinker so that they would go. But what I was doing was, to explain to people are like, oh, well, I have this. I think these things sometimes. And it's real once you start to act on it. That's when it's a delusion. And I believed it. I thought, it sounds crazy now, but I thought the secret place was there. And to talk about one experience, my dad we were out to eat, and he was pointing to one of the, I draw, and he was pointing to one of the pieces of art on the wall, and he said, Scott, would you buy that? And I just blew up on him, and I was like, Dad, I know you're saying this because you think I'll never make it as an artist, and I was just storming. And my parents were just like, what's going on with Scott? I don't understand. They went to see a movie. I was just ruminating, thinking, and I just completely went off. I thought that my dad was, to summarize what I was thinking, I thought he was a sociopath after he became a bodybuilder, which sounds crazy. He is a bodybuilder. He's not a sociopath. but it was just really confusing. This whole time I was in a relationship, which was just really healthy for me. She was trying to get me to get married through all of this. She put a ring on my finger, which was, I just wasn't ready for that. Eventually I broke up with her, which just threw me into this depression. You know, finally I had gotten help. I came home one summer from school, and I was just, I had this lucid moment that would happen. It was really, really weird. And something was off. And, you know, all the people that I admitted my friends that I'd come out to, and I said, you know, I think this is going on. I think people are after me. I think my high school physics teacher and my band director are out to beat me up. I think that, and I was just listing off, and literally my friends, I wish they had, you know, I wish they had gotten on it sooner, because I had to be the one to, you know, finally take myself in and just say this was enough. You know, and then I started on recovery, and you know, I was going to therapy. Like at one point after the breakup, I was going to like 4 days a week, some therapy groups. It was really, really good for me. I met this guy named Gunnar, and I'm going to tell you guys this. But before, let me say the caveat is I have respect for all religious faiths. But Gunnar I was out with Gunnar one time, and we were on a run. Gunnar is this like short, beefy dude, and he works out and he likes to power lift. And I was like, he's like, Scott, I've been asking for a partner like you. And I was like, thank you, Gunnar. You're a good workout partner too. And he goes, do you believe in God, Scott? And I said, well, I'm not a person of faith, but are you a religious person? Do you believe in God? And he goes, yeah, I'm pescatarian. And I say, you mean Presbyterian? And if anyone doesn't know, pescatarian means you eat fish. So that's Gunnar's sort of a bodybuilder, meathead guy. He was a big part of my recovery. I went from working out with him and doing bodybuilding and running and stuff like that. I went from 170 to 215. So I got in good shape. So, yeah, you know, at one point, there wasn't a day that, like, a minute that went through my life that, like, when my depression was at its most, like, peak. You know, I was always just thinking, like, I just go and do it, I should kill myself, or something. I would get embarrassed, and I immediately go there, I should kill myself. And I was thinking about it constantly, you know, as a function of my OCD. And there's a day, just like a couple of weeks ago, that, you know, after all this went down, I'm in a much better place, I thought about it, and it kind of shocked me. I was like, whoa, you know, it's crazy. I was thinking about that just now. You know, and that's the place where I'm at. So, that, you know, I can think those things and it can surprise me. And because that wasn't the case, you know, about a year ago. So, that's my story. I mean, I want to, you know, my message to you guys is that, you know, mental struggles are real, and there's a way to get through them. And for me personally, that was meds, therapy, and exercise, and rebuilding my friend group. So, you guys have any questions?
Cycling again?
Yeah. I go on bike rides with my friend Austin now.
I just want to, first of all, say thank you for sharing your story. It's a really incredible story. I think it takes a lot of strength to share that with others. It's, I think it's remarkable that you're doing this to try to help other people. So I have two questions. One is, then secondly, what do you think was the single most important source of support for you to help you?
So when I first started coming out to my friends weren't that supportive. My family was supportive. My friend group, I had the thing is, my friend group, when it all started happening, was very small. I had my girlfriend, I had my best friend. And my girlfriend, like, she just didn't know what to do. She actually went along with my kids, like, was going along with them. And it was really unusual, looking back on it. But that was the reaction of my friend group. Now I have a much better friend group, and I come out to them when I'm feeling down or something like that, and I get that support, like, hey man, let's hang out. Let's get you feeling better. Let's get your mind off of all this stuff. The single most important factor for me for my recovery was family. Yeah, it was family. So having someone to come back to and be supportive of me. And yeah, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me.
And the statistics between, in recovery, between people who don't have any support versus people who do have family member and support system is staggering. So the recovery rate is down like around 5 or 7% for people who have no support, and it's up around 85–90% for people who do have support. So that support system, to help catch people falling, plays a huge part in maintaining recovery over the long haul.
What was the big tipping point when you thought, okay, something's wrong with me, I need help?
Something's wrong. Because there was a level of uncertainty. I was just what was going on with me. There's this element, because it was psychosis, but it was also my OCD. So things would pop into my head, and no matter how many times I would tell myself that okay, that's not real, try to rationalize it, it would just keep popping in there, And the tipping point for me for getting recovery was probably when I finally explained to someone, when I went into the therapist's office, and it wasn't like I was, I finally explained to them what was going on, and they told me, this is serious. That was, when someone told me it was serious, it was the tipping point. Because it was kind of hard to believe what was happening.
Was it true for you that some people say that when someone finally says to them, diagnosis is very important for lots of reasons, but they're also labeled, but when someone says, helping professional, oh, you have, let's just say, bipolar disorder, that there's a sense of relief too, because then it starts to make more sense why you're having those thoughts and why you're struggling?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you answer her question?
Oh, yeah. There's definitely this sense of yeah, there's absolutely a sense of just through all the confusion, it seems like it seems like kind of like an epiphany. Of course. It made a lot of sense.
I have 3 questions, and I don't know if Scott would be the best one to answer, Tracy would be the best, or Diane or Dr.
Or all 3 of us.
So all 4 of them might be the best to answer, but I'll ask my 3 questions. The first one is, what's the one tool that we can walk out of here with that A, we could either help ourselves, or B, help somebody that we're friends with or we're family with that we might notice might have a mental illness? What's the greatest tool that we can have to not diagnose it, but to recognize it, right? The second question I have is, what's the difference between grief and depression? And grief, depression, and just having a bad day? Or grief, depression, having a bad day, and being stressed about an exam. Or grief, depression, having a bad day, an exam, and feeling like the world is against me. What are the differences with all of those? How do we know that it's just not having a bad day versus depression? Or how do we know it's not just I'm stressed about something versus anxiety?
Between grief and depression, when I broke up with my fiance, she was my best friend. And, some stuff happened, and I really lost a connection with my best friend, my other best friend. And I was grieving over that. And the reality, I think, in my opinion, that there is no difference between grief and depression. It's, for me at least, because when I was depressed in school, and while I was going down, and then it's the exact same thing for me. And you might not, I was really thankful, I thank myself that I sought out help for the therapy I went through and the friend group that when I was going through that. And I think for me, if that were to happen again, I would treat it the same way. But in terms of,
I was going to respond a little bit to what Father David said, because a lot of it has got to do with time, of course. And so when you look at depression, people can get depressed for the medical illness side of this, the changes in our brain chemistry and such. And then there's also something called reactional or situational depression, where you are going through grieving and something's happened, it's going to feel the same. Except that usually if it's reactive, and you don't have the brain chemistry part, you'll get over that over the course of time. And so one of the things in the definition of depression is over 2 weeks, that would mean that the person's really profoundly sad and despondent and just feels horrible, and it goes on, and they don't wake up feeling any better, it goes on and goes on and goes on, and it's not getting better.
To clarify, that's what happened. I lost my friends. So
When it interferes with your daily life, you can no longer function as you did before, and it's interfered with your work or your school or what have you, that's when it becomes, that can be a chronic condition that needs treatment.
And grief can be a trigger.
Absolutely.
So you can have quote-unquote normal grief, but
And
you can
stress
also
can
have
be a trigger.
right, that is a trigger. So I believe, I don't have any, evidence of it, but as I said, I believe that's the case with my daughter, because I believe my mother's death, in combination with other things that were happening internally in her brain chemistry and her genetics, but together, those triggered her descent into her depression.
What tool can we take with us? What's the one thing you want us to take with us? Memorizing a website, memorizing a phone number, calling 911? I mean, tell us how we can be advocates, how we can get rid of the stigma.
I bet we probably all have different answers for that. I'll just say mine real quick, because mine is, listen, be a good friend, be there for someone, really listen. That sounds so ridiculously simple, listen, but really when we think about our relationships today, we're all blazing through life. And we're going 100 million, and if we're talking to our friend, we're really on our phone, and our friend's talking, and we're actually talking on the phone, and something's going, So how often do we really sit down and just listen to our friend? So carving time out to hear what someone is saying, because sometimes it requires a little bit of reading between the lines. They might not be saying man, I want to kill myself, and if they do say that, by the way, you can also always ask that someone has a plan. That's the next question to ask. If there's a plan, then you get on the phone right away. But that would be my 2 cents on that as a concrete tool to really listen to your friends and family. What are they saying and how are they feeling?
that's great. And the thing for me that was most key was developing a friend group. Being close enough to your family that you feel comfortable saying those things to them and being able to tell them. And for me, that was the biggest thing, was my support group, developing that support group. Because there are so many times where, it could have been a really rough night, but I hit up a friend and they're there for me and we hang out and we watch a stupid movie. It's not about talking all the time, like talking about your depression and like, oh, this is what's on my mind and this is what's weighing on me, but kind of distracting yourself from it and you can't go. That's really distracting yourself.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to just say that one of the things, Pam and I have 3 kids, and many of you have not met some of them because they're older now. And one of the things that I always felt in my heart was that it was so important for them to be a part of this church community. Because I always felt that if our son or daughter was uncomfortable coming to us with a problem, that they could go to one of the other adults, their dance instructor, to Father Gary, to talk about it, because sometimes you might have difficulty bringing it up to your parent. But at least in this community, we've got lots of different people who are in one of us, and we all care about you. So if you have that kind of concern. So I saw that as a tremendous advantage for our larger church family. The other thing that I wanted to ask, 2 things. One of them is if we could role play or give some more specific ideas. One of the things that happens frequently is that you're asked to keep secrets. I don't know, has that ever happened to anybody? Where, a friend comes to you and they've got a problem, or you've got a problem, you try to tell somebody, you try to swear them to secrecy. So I think one of the things that Tracy has said was that you have to let them know that you can't do that. But I just don't know how you would do it. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about what if somebody says, everybody hates me, and my mother doesn't like me anymore, and I just don't know what to do, and they say that, but you can't tell anybody, because I'll get in trouble.
I had my older son, or my stepson, had that experience, where one of his friends was on his cell phone, and they were friends online. And she was actually saying that to him. She was actually trying to commit suicide. And she was reaching out to him because he was nice to her, one of the only ones who was ever nice to her. And was swearing him, I don't want it, this, I don't want to end it, basically. And he didn't know what to do. And he came into me and he's like, Mom, I don't know what to do here. She doesn't want, I don't know. And so I kept him texting her, keeping her online on the phone, but he didn't know where she lived. She knew his last name. So what we did was we called, and I said, you need to let her know that I can't keep this. You're telling me, you need to let her know you're talking to me. And what we did was we called 911. And we gave I said, I don't know her address. Here's her name, here's her cell phone number, and they were able to triangulate where that cell phone was, and they showed up at her door. And they talked to her family, and they got her into treatment that night. And so it was kind of like one of those things where we were able to say to her, look, we're going to get you help. And she was like, oh, please don't. I don't want my parents knowing. But a couple weeks later, after she had been in treatment, she texted him again and said, please tell your mom thank you. And so it's kind of like one of those things. Don't be afraid to go to your parents and say, my friend is doing this. What do I do? Because, even if you call the police and have the police show up at their door, her family was so thankful that someone took the time to actually keep them on the line and send help. Don't be afraid to go to your parents or go, like Dr. Bob said, go to someone you trust to keep them on the line. And you know what? I would rather, like if Sean came to me, I would rather, and I said it to Chris when this was happening, I said, you know what? I don't care if she hates you for the rest of her life. She's going to have a life.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I have numerous friends because I can share my experiences with people. People feel comfortable sharing their experiences with me. And I've had numerous friends tell me they wanted to commit suicide or they plan to commit suicide. Basically, there's this uncomfortable point where they tell you this and then tell you that you can't tell anybody and then tell you that they're going to do it unless you're there for them. And at that point, what I think is that's incredibly unfair to anyone to do to anyone. Your job is not to be their lifeline. Your job is to be their friend. And the people who are there to keep themselves safe, the people who are paid to do that are the police, the people who they grew up with, their family, so tell them, because it's an incredibly unfair situation to be put in. From my, I'm supposed to say all this is my experience.
And the reality is, look, that friendship may be impacted for a little while, right? Because that person might be angry, they might, be upset, but once they get the help they need and they start feeling better, they're still going to have a life, and it might take a little bit of work, but they're going to be grateful that you helped and did the right thing by going to a trusted adult or calling 911 or calling the police or telling your parent or whoever it is. They're still going to have their life. So that's, the key.
Do you find that that's the most difficult part for somebody who's experiencing this, to make that first initial outreach, to call somebody, to speak to their parents, to talk to a friend? Is that the most difficult part, and then it gets easier as you get treatment or get help or go through it? What do you find is the most difficult, challenging part of that?
The most difficult challenge, it depends. Like for me, getting up in the morning and just getting something. Like one time, my friend Joshua, who lives in Massachusetts, was like, I was feeling depressed one day, and he hits me up. He was like, dude, I want to listen to your EP. Send it over. And I was like, okay, that's going to be the thing I do today. It's kind of like EP. So that was the most difficult thing. But the most difficult thing for having someone seek and trying to get someone treated for mental health is seeing them suffer and then not having them help themselves. And I see it with my friends who come to me and tell me these things all the time. And they don't help themselves, not because they don't want to, because they're, it's like, of course there's personal responsibility and that how you do it, but that was the hardest thing for me in trying to help my friends.
What about in terms of your overall treatment? Was the most difficult time from the very beginning when you got easier time?
No, it was, the thing, it all sort of like, it was all hard until it wasn't. so it was, there's this one day, where, and it wasn't a bad day, and there's this sort of a light bulb goes on, like, I guess it was a good day. I guess that's how it works.
And there's a shade of gray that I won't go into too much just because we have some parents here though, that there's a big difference between a loved one or a child who's 18 and over and under 18. So if you suspect that someone, either your child or someone you know's child who is under 18 has issue, I encourage you to please encourage them to seek help. Because at that age, we have the ability to do what we need to do to get our kids help. My daughter told me every day I was the one with the problem. I didn't know what I was talking about. She was perfectly fine. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. And what are you putting in my water to poison me? So, I was able, my husband and I were able to do what we needed to do. That becomes exponentially harder, virtually impossible. People are working on that, but the reality is at an older age it becomes very difficult to do that for our family members. Dr. Bob?
So I just wanted to encourage all of the kids in my prior role, what I used to do, we would have friends come to us with a concern. Not necessarily that a friend of theirs said they were going to kill themselves, but that there were saying things that were a little bit scary. And they would come to the office and they would go to the counselor. And the people at your school, they have a lot of contacts that they can then help your friend. So don't be afraid to go to your school counselor. They're particularly
is just how many people here have a Facebook account? Or something like it? So, I mean, one of the questions is, any advice around social media? I mean, there's part of this is if you're dealing with somebody who's got a problem, it's how do you respond to them on the Facebook account? What are the things you say to them? And as we know, bullying on the internet is one of the worst things, and people can sometimes be vicious in the posts that they put back. And so there's also, and in fact, had a niece I talked to yesterday who was having a lot of problems with feeling depressed, who was posting her feelings on Facebook, instead of talking to her parents. And
well, I will tell you, your daughter, who is my daughter's godmother, many moons ago was on Facebook at the same time that my daughter was. My daughter was putting on posts talking about there's no purpose in life, and I don't know why I'm here, and I just don't think I want to do this anymore. And she called us, so made sure that we were home and that we knew what she was doing. So it's sort of the same thing, only, the cyber version of it, which is the same. Like, we can't, just because it's on, Facebook or whatever, doesn't mean it's any less true. So we have, there's that distance that's created now because we think we have good relationships with people because we're having them online, when in fact it's doing the exact opposite. But I don't want to get on that soapbox. But it's the same kind of idea, which is if someone's putting, texting you or putting something online, it's just as true, and you have to take it just as seriously and tell your parent or another trusted adult. Yeah, exactly.
That's really my friends. That's why I encourage you guys to get a good friend group or find people you trust. Because one of my friends came out as suicidal to me. He's been posting all these. He's really lucky. He's different. It's different because he's older, and he's older than you guys. And his bullying is such an issue as you grow older. But he has this friend group that's coming up, and I came in I invited him over for dinner, one night, and he has people like, hey, let's hang out. And people are being really supportive of him and trying to, keep him occupied. And, that's why it's like, you don't want to surround yourselves. You want to surround yourselves with good people.
Fabulous, Grace. Any more questions? Anyone?
When, let's say, you have a group of friends, they aren't really supporting you, they're being negative, but you feel like if you leave that group of friends, you'll never find any more friends.
Oh, that's totally what I thought with my I spent a long time and it's hard because you're a student, and you're surrounded by the same people every day, and it's kind of clicky. It's hard, but I absolutely think that it's worth it to leave those people behind and disconnect and create new relationships. And it's different for you, but that was honestly the best thing I could do was just leaving the people who weren't good for me behind. And you'll know it was the right decision because a couple years down the line, they will be a lot happier.
You feel better, when you're around people who support you and who are true valued friends. You won't walk away feeling worse. When you hang out with people who are mean or that kind of stuff, then you walk away going, wow, that sucked, and I don't even, you really. When you hang out with good friends and people who are, more in line with your thoughts and values, then you walk away from those times hanging out, and you're, uplifted and you're happier and you're lighter. And those are the type of people you want to spend your time around, because you don't need to, spend a lot of time around people who are dragging us down.
Some other thing at your age is, if you're feeling lonely and stuff, don't discount the adults that are around you if you're ever looking to talk. When I was going through my psychosis, my girlfriend wanted to elope with me. It was extremely confusing. And my dad was like, okay, so my dad had a clue about what was going on. And he was like, okay, Scott, I want you to talk to 10 adults. about this and what they would think about you eloping with your girlfriend. And so that's what I did. So don't discount it. And I found out that I had a lot of friends that were.
What happens if the group of friends that you want to get rid of, but they know that you want to leave your friends and they threaten you, like they'll say bad things about you? Make sure that you don't get any more friends.
Okay, oh, yes, we have the perfect person.
Just so you guys know, Ma'am, Mrs. Gonzalez is a retired principal for many years in the
Not
future.
everybody can hear.
Just so you know, that's the experience that she brings.
But I would encourage you to go right to your school counselor and talk to that person, and they can give you a lot of pointers and things that you can say so that you would not feel. Sometimes people will put you down to make themselves feel better. You never want to have that kind of person. You want to have people and friends who build you up and don't threaten. So what you really want to do is talk to your school counselor or a trusted teacher, and they can maybe give you some pointers on types of things you can say and maybe steer you towards some better friends.
Or any other trusted adult friend. In your case where you're homeschooled, you can talk to any other trusted adult. Okay.
And if they do start cyberbullying you or bullying you, don't keep that a secret either. That's not okay. It's not okay when people call us names and put us down.
What about, you know how there's someone taking their own life? What about when you hear, and not like the fear, but the thought of someone taking their own life?
Did you hear her question? That's a great question. Say it loud.
Oh, yeah, say it loud.
Stand up and say it loud.
What's the difference between someone taking your life and you taking your own life? Is that the same thing as like?
If somebody threatens to take somebody else's life, what would be in that situation?
Well, no, she's asking about thoughts about that, so I'm not. You mean like if you know someone's having thoughts about killing somebody?
Yeah, or like they have thoughts about someone.
Well, I mean, yes.
That would be, absolutely. If you were having thoughts about someone, that's what, like, they had thoughts, that's what was going with me, is that I always had this irrational fear that my best friend, my physics teacher, and my high school dance teacher are all going to get together. I mean, it's, if you're having, like, irrational fears, it's one of the paranoia, that you should absolutely talk to someone.
Okay, I think that's it.
Can I say just a couple things?
Yeah.
First of all, Scott, I want to tell you that you're one of the greatest people I've ever met. Understanding you're going to be very brave and courageous to share your story and the book that you're writing, and I really appreciate your love and support. I just want to share a couple of things with you guys, and I want you to know where I'm coming from as your priest, okay? The first thing is, at Sensitive Summer Camp, 1 out of every 4 kids that came to me for confession told me that they either had one time in their life thought about taking their own life, 2, knew somebody that wanted to take their own life. And so I wanted to make sure that when I came back down the hill, is what I call it, and into my role as your priest, that you all know, as the members of the youth group of the parish that I serve, the sheep of the flock that I have, that that's never the answer. That you're never alone, that you're loved, and that you're surrounded by love, and if there's any kind of an issue going on in your life, that there are hundreds of people just here in this parish, and probably thousands outside of this parish in your life in other places, soccer coaches, baseball coaches, gymnastic coaches, or counselors and teachers at school that would get you whatever kind of help that you need. So I want you to know that, okay? The final thing is this. I want you all to be, remember we talked about being a champion a few years ago? We talked about being champions against bullying. I want you all to be champions in your lives. I want you to go into your lives and know that you're loved, There's nothing that you can ever do that is wrong enough not to have the love of God in your life. There's nothing you can do that would ever take that love from God away from you. God loves you no matter what. He loves you even more when you fall and you get back up and you turn to Him. He loves you more. Okay? So I want you to know that. And if I can be the person outside of your parents that you need to talk to, come talk to me. If you want to get in touch with Tracy or talk more with Scott, and you guys as well. Diane's office is on Verdugo. You can walk there from here.
Yeah, and I would also like to mention that we do have family-to-family classes for family members that have loved ones with mental illness or friends. It's a 12-week course. It is, again, free of charge, but it is an awesome set of classes.
I teach it.
Highly
It's
recommend.
super
Tracy's
awesome.
one of our teachers. Highly recommend that you will just learn so much about what's going on with that person. Communication skills, the biology of the brain, it just goes on and on and on. In addition to our support groups, we have wonderful support groups throughout the county as well. They're all very, very helpful. It makes you won't feel alone. I felt alone with my son as well. I thought I was the only one on the planet. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go get my son's going to go down in history with this weird kind of thing he's got going on in his brain. And the first time I set foot in a support group with Mommy, I looked around, all these people? I'm not alone. And it was the most wonderful feeling. I just felt so warm inside, even though I was tormented with what was going on with my son. I felt validated, and that I wasn't going crazy myself. And so, now it's really awesome.
You know, that's what I was just thinking the whole time I was going through it. You know, there's always this thought that, oh, it's just an excuse. It's just some, like, you know, it's just like somehow it's my fault. You know, there's all this feeling of like, oh, I just need to try harder. Even with the psychosis, like, I was really confused with what was going on with me. You know, it happens to people all across the country. You can find this group is great because it connects you with people that you can relate to and talk to. It's just, got all this support you guys need.
My card is on the table, Diane's card is on the table on your way out. There's information right around the corner there. There's more information on family to family. There's information on NAMI. So there's magnets. Grab a magnet, stick it on your fridge. There's all kinds of stuff. So
How to help a friend handle
and there's pen.
Oh,
And there's pen in there too.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you pick up those handouts on the way out.
Yes. What happens if you know someone that wants to commit suicide and everyone you tell says, oh, it's what they want to do, keep it a secret? What happens if
You need to tell somebody who can do something about it. If you need to tell somebody in authority who can do something about it. Okay? You need to right away tell somebody.
If you don't know anybody, call 911.
That's right.
Okay?
Don't keep it a secret.
Okay? Just for an example, there's lots of debate. On the way here, I was listening to people debating whether or not the LA school should have been closed today or not. And they're saying, oh, it was a hoax, it wasn't a hoax. But you never know with these things, right? So you don't want to take the chance. You don't, if you call 911 and it's a hoax because the person was just joking, then no harm, no foul, right? But if you really save somebody's life, like Barry was saying, then you save somebody's life, right? So don't ever hesitate to go to a trusted adult and talk about it, okay? The last thing I wanted to tell you was every one of you is special in my life, and I want you to know that if there's ever a time where you're hurting or you're sad, that you have to come to somebody and tell them that you're feeling this way so that you can get the assistance that you need. Because it's not fair for you to live in this complicated society feeling that you're alone, because you're not. Okay? The way that we have all of these cell phones, and these gadgets, and these Instagrams, and Facebook, we think that we're bringing people together, but we're actually keeping people apart. And that's the whole point of what I try to do in the church, is bring us together. And what's the one thing that we do every Sunday where we come together? Everybody does, or 90% of the people do. They do what? They take communion, right? Communion means to come together, to come in communion. And that's the whole point of the church, is everything that we do. Communion. Okay? And then we'll have coffee. So, donuts. We're going to have the donuts anymore. So on that note, are there any more questions for Tracy, Diane, Scott, who's my new hero, or Dr. Law? No? Okay, let's stand up and let's say a prayer. And there's more food and cookies back there for all of them. And we can meet up for everyone. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, Lord God, we thank you for bringing special people into our lives like Diane, Tracy, and Scott, who can educate us on the difficulties of life and how we can become better people through knowing ways in which to cope with the difficulties of this life. We ask that you bless them, bless all of us, and allow us, Lord, to be great people in your kingdom, and to come and in this world be shining beacons of light for your holy now and forever, the ages of ages. Amen. There's cookies, there's more soda.